Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for our 32nd episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show, where we discuss pertinent topics regarding the food and beverage industry with industry professionals. My name is Steve Zimmerman, and I'm the founder and principal broker of Restaurant Realty. And I'm delighted to have Scott Greenberg as my co-host today. Scott is a keynote and TEDx speaker, a writer who has written 2 books, a business coach, and a former award-winning franchise owner. Scott is the go-to expert for organizations aiming to elevate their business and the people behind them. Scott dives deep into the human elements that directly impact business performance. He equips leaders with a peak performance mindset, empowering them to lead more effectively and cultivate high-performing teams. His innovative management tool, 30-Second Leadership, has revolutionized the way businesses enhance employee mindset, skill set, and overall performance. Scott is a well-known international speaker and has given presentations in all 50 United States and throughout the world with clients including McDonald's, the United States Air Force, TEDx, Allstate, KFC, Great Clippers, Wyndham Hotel Group, IHOP, Remax, Salesforce, Cargill, Columbia Sportswear, Amgen Pharmaceuticals, Nike, Young Presidents Organization, and countless others. For 10 years, Scott was a multi-unit franchise with edible arrangements, and that's his linkage to the food and beverage operation. For those of you not familiar with edible arrangements, it's like a flower store that does flower arrangements, but instead of flowers, they use fruit. So he was involved, in addition to building a top-ranked flagship store in Los Angeles, Scott acquired a second struggling location and made it profitable within a year. His operation won the Edible Arrangements Best Customer Service and Manager of the Year awards out of more than 1,000 locations worldwide. Scott serves as a contributing writer for Entrepreneur.com, Global Franchise Magazine, and Nation's Restaurant News, and is the author of 2 books, The Wealthy Franchisee, Game-Changing Steps to Become a Thriving Franchise Superstar, as well as his newest book, Stop the Shift Show, deal with your struggling hourly workers into a top-performing team. So without further ado, please welcome Scott as our co-host. And Scott, it's delightful to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. I'm glad you only focused on the good stuff there, because if you read things from the other list, we would have no time to discuss anything else.
Oh, okay. Well, I've only learned good things about you, so that's, hopefully the way your life is, and I think
Well, I try to keep the other stuff a secret, and I don't put that in my bio. So
yeah, I got it.
We'll focus on the good stuff.
I do the same. Yes. Okay. So for question number 1, tell me about your background a little bit more in depth and how you become a business speaker and author, please.
Sure. So I grew up the son of a serial entrepreneur. My father, I always struggled. Hey, what does your dad do for a living? The answer could change from month to month. I mean, he always worked really hard, but in between jobs, he had businesses. Some of them were franchises, but a lot of restaurants. So he had a Winchell's Donuts. He had 4 or 5 Po Folks restaurants. He had ice cream stores. Most of my life, he had businesses. Most of the time, they were restaurants. It was more of a cautionary tale than anything for me, because I saw how hard he worked and the headaches he had. My first job was working at one of his ice cream stores at San Diego's Seaport Village, very busy tourist area. So I got to be part of that and got a taste of that. But what was nice is that kind of chaotic entrepreneurial way of living, that was what I saw growing up. So for me, it was normal. So when the time came for me to kind of get into that business, for me, it was easy. For my wife, who has, her dad was a college professor, has had 2 jobs his entire life, she couldn't imagine why I said, hey, in addition to the motivational speaking I've been doing for 13 years, how about we open a franchise, Edible Arrangements? She was like, what? But for me, that kind of, random out of left field thing was quite normal. And it was a great experience. So I was still doing all this motivational speaking, increasingly for businesses. But then I had my first of 2 these Edible Arrangements franchises, working with food, managing employees, marketing, paying bills, the good, the bad, and the ugly of that business. But over time, we got better and better and better. And I started getting invitations to speak to other franchise systems, including a lot of restaurants, about what they could do to build great businesses. So I watched my father I've done it myself. But for a number of years now, I've worked with a lot of other brands, a lot of restaurant brands. I've seen their struggling people. I've seen their best people. All my work is about the best people in business and what the rest of us can do to replicate them.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Okay, how about telling us something about the restaurant brands you've worked with and what you're seeing is happening out there in the restaurant industry?
Sure. So probably 80% of the audiences I speak to are franchises, and of those, probably half are some sort of food service. So I've spoken to McDonald's a few times. In fact, I'll be speaking to all the McDonald's franchisees in Canada next month. Jack in the Box, IHOP, KFC, Round Table Pizza, Tropical Smoothie Cafe. Early this year, I spoke at the franchise convention for Ben and Jerry's. That was fun. Freddy's Frozen Custard, Mendocino Farms. I'm sure if I think there'll be more. A lot of like smaller operations and some big ones as well. So I've definitely had a lot of exposure to the industry. What I'm seeing is it's tough out there right now. Certainly the pandemic turned the industry upside down. This has been discussed extensively. What's still happening today is I see a lot of owners, especially franchisees, who are still concerned. Supply chain stuff is getting better, but pricing isn't. It's easier now to find employees, but certainly here in California, paying employees is significantly more expensive. And so it's tough right now. And if you just watch the news, it seems like every single day another restaurant chain is filing for bankruptcy or closing stores, that sort of thing. But there are outliers and those who are doing well. So the restaurant industry has never been stable. It's always been a place for people who are passionate about it and who are willing to take the risks. But it's a fascinating place to watch right now.
Yeah. Do you think, especially in California, where, the fast food 60 units or more chains went to $20, and which has sort of set the bar for the rest of the industry. Do you think the biggest issue that the restaurant operators in California and probably elsewhere are having is they can't offset all their costs and their menu price increases, and therefore their margins are getting slammed? Is that what the consensus that you're sort of hearing?
I see that quite a bit. Although it's interesting as the data is coming in about are they really reducing, labor hours, that sort of thing. And there's a bigger picture there. I was just reading about how McDonald's, they put in these kiosks, which supposedly was going to reduce labor hours, but the kiosks have done such a good job selling, they need more staff in the kitchen.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of, there's still demands for labor that's there. So it sort of remains to be seen. Just so happens my daughter, who's 18, is working her very first job right now at
Hmm.
Five Guys in California.
Oh,
So she's making $20 an hour. So selfishly, I support it because whatever money she makes is money I don't have to give her.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's disruptive, and
Yeah.
we're going to see what happens, and everybody's trying to adapt to this new normal. And usually, when California starts something, a lot of other places follow. So we're going to
Yeah.
have to see what happens.
Sure. Are you seeing robotics to any extent being introduced into the kitchen to basically eliminate manual labor to try to offset, increasing labor costs? Are you seeing that at all at any of these
I'm
chains?
I'm hearing about it. I'm not getting too much into the kitchen aspect because of the nature of what I focus on, helping these operators. Um, with what I call the human side of business. So
Yes.
sort of how they think, how they lead their teams, and then the experience they provide to customers. But I'm hearing about it, everyone else. Everyone's rushing to find technology to how can we, reduce labor hours, rely less on these workers who sometimes are very hard to find, and use technology. But what's interesting is every time new technology is adopted, there seems to be an increase in even labor for different things.
Hmm.
But again, McDonald's is a great example of that, right? Putting in the kiosks. And in general, more and more restaurants are relying on third-party sales and delivery. And those automated systems, apps sell better than people. Part of it is the courage to suggest upsells, but also there's, you can kind of control the flow. There's imagery, there's things that you're not necessarily going to get for an individual. Well, all these things have increased the demand for labor in the kitchen. So I guess the answer is yes, there's a lot more discussion and increasing implementation of robotics. I understand. Whether or not that leads to a reduction in labor or the need for labor remains to be seen.
Okay. Well, thanks for that thorough response. So, new question. What has been the common thread around the successful business operators you've met and written about?
So great question. And there's a difference between what it is and what people think. A lot of people believe that it's all about really tight operations, right? Give me the menu, give me the technology, show me the steps to execute, and then I'm just going to work really hard. But in my observation of working with all these people and studying them and writing about them, and really try to objectively determine what makes those top people different from everyone else. Yeah, they're working hard, and yeah, they've developed or they're sticking to a proven system, but that's not the secret to success. That is the prerequisite. What I have observed when I look at the top people compared to everyone else is mastery of the human side of their business. Again, as you talked about, their mindset, their ability to manage teams, and the experience they provide to customers. Because we can look at different parts of the operation, such as marketing. Marketing is about advertising, but it's also about patience and faith, and the willingness to wait and see. You plant invested seeds today that might take 6 months for people to come in. So it's about patience and faith. Managing employees can't just be about, hiring them and, training them to work. It's also about engaging them and teaching them teamwork and understanding what makes them stay, because it's not paying them more. That might make them stay a little bit longer, but there's something deeper going on there. The great customer experience can't be about next in line, may I help you? It can't be about transactions. It has to be about connecting and elevating emotions. That's what makes customers want to talk about you and come back and repeat an experience. So what I've noticed about all these great operators, whether it's the franchisee I wrote about who owns 128 KFCs, or a single unit who just owns an ice cream store, but it does really well, what they have in common is mastery of that human side of their business on top of marketing and on top of tight operations.
So they're definitely proponents of management psychology, I would assume, to a large extent.
The psychology, the sociology, understanding influence, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And it's not that you need to have a degree in psychology. It's just a bit more self-awareness of, what am I bringing to my restaurant, right? Am I an asset when I walk into the building, or might I be a liability because I don't have the right people skills, because I give into fear, because I'm impatient?
Yes.
Am I really elevating the people around me, whether it is my suppliers, whether it is a franchisor, if there's there, certainly my employees, and certainly my customers? What is the experience I'm giving them? Emotionally, how am I impacting them? Because people make decisions based on emotions. So all these really great restaurant operators, they get this.
Yes.
But it's tough, because when things get difficult and maybe you're not making money or you're really busy, the human stuff is the first thing to go. And that's where we need to put the most emphasis during that time. And that's what the best restaurant operators do.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, next question. Your leadership focus is on hourly workers. So how are they different from people who earn a salary?
Yeah, so, when my first book came out, it's called The Wealthy Franchisee. So it really profiles top franchisees and what they all have in common. And I spent some time in that book writing about, the managing of employees. And that has generated the most requests for speeches, because there's such a pain point around that. So I decided my second book to focus on the managing employees, and specifically hourly employees. And in my research, I really began to appreciate the differences between those earning an hourly wage and those who are on salary. There's a billion management books out there that are broad in general, that don't really make the distinction between the hourly worker and the salary worker. So obviously, the way they're paid are differently. Salary workers have the respect of saying, it doesn't exactly matter when you show up, that kind of thing. You have a salary that it's going to be the same. You can rely on it. You can count on it. So that makes it easier to plan a life. It's the same, going to be the same money you're going to make, and probably going to work the same schedule. So you can plan a life, right? You can, you can plan care for your kids. You can figure out what kind of house or apartment you can afford to live in, what you can make payments on. It's easier to get credit when you have that stable, reliable income. Hourly workers on, a given month, they don't know how much money they're going to make, and they don't necessarily know what hours they're going to work or how many hours they're going to work. But these people are statistically more likely to be working other jobs, or going to school, or in a household where things aren't as stable. So they're constantly juggling, because there's all that change happening around them. In a salary environment, relationships tend to be deeper and meaningful. There's usually a path to growth within the organization. With hourly work, it tends to be more transactional. I can't tell you how many restaurant owners I've said, well, if I can get 6 months out of them, they'll stay for 6 months, that's okay. And you look at quick service restaurants and the churn rates are unbelievable compared to other industries, but employees feel that. And so they don't feel as deep a connection to the organization. So, so there's that. Hourly workers tend to be less experienced, lesser skilled, less educated. So they don't respond as well to abstraction. So if you start talking with this big over-the-top mission statement or value statements, that's not going to mean as much to them compared to people who have more experience, maybe more education, who are on salary. So, sometimes organizations, they try to train their hourly employees and say, yes, our mission is we want to change the world. And like they're selling frozen custard. No employee is going to believe that or connect to it compared to something more down to earth, such as, hey, we exist to create moments of joy. That they can understand and we can hold them accountable. Same thing with values. I was working with a restaurant chain that brought me in to help them build culture. And one of their values is integrity. So I asked one of the employees, do you know that integrity is one of your values? And she said, yes, they say it all the time. I said, okay, tell me what integrity is. And she couldn't define it. So she knows that that's a value, but she didn't know what it meant. And so I guided them on how to translate these broad values into do's and don'ts, agreements, behaviors that we can all understand that demonstrate the value. So again, hourly workers don't do as well with abstraction. And we haven't even got into demographics or any of that. It's really a different population. And just like we need to change our approach to serving different customer bases, we have to change our approach to managing different parts of the workforce. And so hourly workers are very different. And the tools we'd use to manage a law firm or some corporation, they're not going to work as well in a restaurant with hourly workers.
Yeah. Do you have any idea in the restaurant industry what percent of those hourly workers actually have more than one job in order to sustain themselves?
I don't recall the statistic, but I know that it's meaningful. And if they don't have another job, either just other things going on, such as class. I see my daughter juggling. She has class and she has assignments, and she asks and she has appointments she has to go to, and so she tries to get her employer. She's working fast food, Five Guys, and she has to juggle, right? But she's not trying to make a living. We're still supporting her. But if she was, that'd be really tough. So yeah, I don't know the statistic, but it's a meaningful number.
Yeah. So what is she doing at Five Guys?
Everything.
Oh, really?
They're cross-training her at everything. So she's flipping burgers. She's
Oh.
making shakes. She's in the back doing food prep. Her preference is to be, she calls it working reg. So working the register and taking orders. That's really her superpower.
That's great. Great opportunity. That'll give her a good view of different things, the real world for sure. So how do different generations factor into the hourly workforce and how employees perform?
So this is something that is discussed ad nauseum, and people love to talk about generations. And I hear so many restaurant owners complain about the newest generations. They're lazy, they're entitled, they don't want to work, they're snowflakes, they're easily offended. And here's the thing is people have been complaining about younger generations from the very beginning, right? Boomers were complaining about us Gen Xers. Boomers were complained about. In my book, in my presentations, I have quotes dating back all the way to Aristotle of people who were criticizing the generations that come after them. So here's the thing. We can look at Gen Z, who increasingly is working in restaurants right now. And yes, as a generation, they are different. There are different values. But we can criticize them, right? Again, their need for, emotional safety. I'm a Gen Xer. Emotional safety, I expect to be abused when I go to work, right? They don't. It's a different value. And as a father of two kids of that generation, I don't want them to be abused. And I want them to have life balance, if they can get flexibility, that kind of thing. What we need to do is stop judging younger generations and instead just seek to understand them and then manage them accordingly. So it's not about endorsing or enabling their behavior. It's about understanding it and adapting to it. But here's what's more significant. The one thing I can say with absolute certainty about Gen Z is that they are younger than everyone else, which means they have less experience, they have less feedback, less things to draw from. And for most of them, their brains aren't done developing. The human brain takes 25 years to fully develop. So, my daughter's 18. My son's got his first job when he was 16. So they're not yet done yet, right? But we older people, and there's a thing I write about in my book, we tend to forget how we were when we were young,
Right.
and we tend to believe that we were better. And we take our current perspective and think we had that same perspective and the same abilities. But every time I complain about my kids to my mom, she responds by reminding me of something that I did when I was young. I'm like, oh, I guess you're right.
Right.
So part of what employers need to do with younger generations is to understand them, but help them grow and help them develop. But our judging of them isn't helpful. And there's plenty of information about what makes every generation unique and what their values are out there. But one last thing I'll say to answer this question is, one of the things that younger generations want is they're very entrepreneurial. Generation Z is known for being entrepreneurial. They someday want to have their own businesses. Not all of them, but a higher percentage compared to when that question was asked to previous generations. So I tell their bosses, well, then treat the job like a paid internship. If you have employees who are entrepreneurial who someday want to have their own business, well, then as you train them in things, explain how what they're learning here might help them with future businesses. That'll give them a deeper sense of meaning and appreciation, and you acknowledging that they're not just working for you, but they're a human being on a path to something bigger. And you having that conversation with them will engage them more in the business. I also say that just trying to pay people more money, it's not enough, because just like customers want more than the food, they want an experience. So do employees. So if we can enhance the experience of different generations based on the values of that generation and of the individuals, we're more likely to engage and retain them.
Yeah. How do you feel about the technology that exists today and its impact on the young generation in terms of their immersion into social media, texting, and their lives being, totally enmeshed into their cell phones? How do you deal with that? I mean, it's just a reality. I mean, I see in my grandchildren, and it's very difficult to cope for my generation with that excessiveness, in their technology. What's your thoughts on that?
It certainly is different
Yeah.
than us older people. I will say that. How do I feel about it? I hate it. I wish my daughter would put her phone down and have dinner with us.
Yes.
Right. Of course.
Exactly.
And there's research and there's data out there about the impact. Younger generations themselves say that they believe that social media is awful and wish it wasn't there, yet they're going to feel like they're missing out. So yeah, how do I feel about it? Concerned.
Yes.
But that's less important than that is the reality. So
Yeah.
what does that mean for us as employers, right? I mean, what is it that appeals to them with social media? Well, part of that is feeling connected. So what can we do to create that? And if they want to be on their phones, well, then let's lean into it. Let's have them go ahead and take lots of pictures about what's happening at the restaurant and post about it and help contribute to this narrative that, wow, we're this fun, awesome place to eat and this fun, awesome place to work.
Sure.
Right. Let's lean into that. And, and the other thing is the traditional mentality is, well, I don't want you on your phone. I don't want you doing these things during work because I own you. For this hour where I'm paying you an hourly wage, I own you. How dare you do something that meets your own needs? We need to get over that. As long as the work is getting done, let them go ahead and meet that need, right? So again, I'm not trying to enable them. I'm not endorsing the behavior, but I'm trying to be realistic about what works. So let's go ahead and maybe accommodate that a little bit, but work it to our advantage. Ask them to go ahead, put someone in charge of some of the social media, maybe create, a Facebook page for employees, but that the whole world can see so that they can, again, promote the restaurant and promote the sense of teamwork and the culture and what a fun experience it has. So business-wise, since we can't stop it or control it, let's embrace it and work it to our advantage.
Yeah, great response. Yeah, I agree with that very much so. Okay, everyone talks about creating a positive culture. What does that actually mean? And how can busy restaurant operators accomplish this?
It might be one of the most important questions that restaurant operators have to ask themselves. I believe the average business owner and manager does not know what culture is. When you ask them, tell me about your culture, what do you do to improve the culture? They start listing all the nice things they do for employees. Starbucks gift card, buying them pizza, celebrating birthdays. These are acts of kindness, but that's not culture. Culture is not something that is, good or bad or kind. Culture, the actual definition of culture is our way of doing things. that if I'm part of a group of 2 or more people, what are our social norms? The way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we resolve conflict. And I break it down in my book into 2 things. It's a common set of beliefs and then a common set of behaviors, rituals that reinforce those beliefs. So you could think of a religion, right? And all religions are certainly a culture of people who share a belief system and values and perspectives on what actually happened, what was true. And then there are rituals to support that, whether it's certain ways of praying, songs you sing, food you eat, foods you don't eat, holidays, that kind of thing. Everybody has their way of doing things. Now, I'll give you an example. I was in Europe recently, and I was with 2 other people, and we went to a restaurant, and they said, we're very busy. We have a reservation for a table that can accommodate you. So you can eat, but you have to be gone within 2.5 hours.
Oh,
Like 2.5 hours. What American sits for 2.5 hours,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
45 minutes on a bit, but culturally for them,
Yeah.
that is the experience, right?
Interesting.
And so again, it's not good or bad, it's what it is. So we need to be deliberate about creating culture because every group has a culture, the best by design, but most by default. So we need to be deliberate. And so, the way I talk about it is employees need to feel culture in 3 different ways. First, in their head. Intellectually, they need to understand the mission and the values, but also need to understand our way of doing things. So have other employees, it's better than the manager. Other employees say, hey, this is how we do it. When we show up, we say hi to each other. And here's our way when we have conflict. Here's our way of doing things, right? So we onboard them into the system. Let's onboard them into the culture. So they need to intellectually understand what it is so that they can hold each other accountable to it. So they need to experience it in their head. Then they need to experience it in the heart. They need to feel the culture and feel like, wow, I'm part of something and it's meaningful for me. The same way if I'm with a group of friends, if I'm with, my family, I'm feeling something there. And specifically, it meets what I call my soft needs. Most restaurants focus on hard needs, which is paying the employees or it's what they get. Soft needs are adhering to what I want to feel. And these days, what people want to feel, especially younger generations, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of emotional safety, right? If I can identify the soft needs of the people who work for me and meet those needs, they're going to feel a deeper connection compared to another place down the street that doesn't, or maybe they're offering another $1 per hour, but no one's going to leave for an extra $1 per hour if they really feel connected to the culture of which they are a part.
Yeah.
So we need to identify and meet their soft needs so that they're experiencing in the head, in the heart, and finally on the floor. What that means is regular practices that communicate to employees that culture is important, whether it's a pre-shift meeting where you talk about values or a post-shift meeting where everyone talks about, hey, give us an example of how you demonstrated integrity today, or other rituals and things that remind people on a regular basis that culture is important and not just the operation and not just money. I mentioned my daughter, with this job, she was so nervous the night before starting her job, right? And so she had a lot of soft needs that were there. So what happened on her first day? They put her in front of a computer for 4 hours of watching training videos.
Oh,
There was no ritual. But what if when she showed up, when she walked through the door, the other employees applauded for her? Well, there's a poster on the wall that said, welcome, Peyton. What if instead of saying, what's your shirt size? And then throwing the red hat and shirt, they wrapped it up and made it seem like it was swag and made a ceremony out of getting it.
that's cool.
Right? There's all kinds of things that can be done, rituals that make people feel like, wow, this is something special.
Yeah.
That is what culture is. It's not buying people pizza.
Yeah. I hear you. Wow, that's very a unique way of getting someone really feel a part of the culture. No question. Very good. So you've done a lot of speaking and training, obviously, and specifically for the restaurant industry. Can you tell us something about some of your speaking and training gigs, some of the, high points that you delve in, when you deal with, the restaurant industry per se?
Sure. So, I'm always asking questions first about what are the pain points for the client? What is that they care about, most? So right now I'm in the process. Again, McDonald's Canada is bringing me in to speak to all of their franchisees. So in addition to talking to the people of that corporate office in Canada, I'm interviewing a number of franchisees because often what the franchisor thinks they need might be different than what the franchisees themselves believe they need. My job is to kind of accommodate all of that. So I ask a lot of questions to find out what it is. In the restaurant industry, more often than not, the issue is around employees these days, more than anything else. Of course, people are always interested in learning about marketing and driving more business to the front door, what they can do to cut costs. But I'm not an expert in their operation, so I focus on the human side. And so often, if it's a franchise operation, the franchisor might want me to help franchisees understand how to improve their own mindset, to stick to the system, to be willing to adapt to change. Franchisors like that message. The franchisees themselves never say, "Hey, Scott, can you help me adapt to change?" Or can you say more about sticking to the system? Their pain points are more usually around employees. So these days, especially since writing my second book, Stop the Shift Show, that is what a big part of what my focus is on, is especially in restaurants with hourly workers, is what can you do to build a team, to build a culture, and to keep people engaged, to make them want to do great, even when you're not there directly supervising them.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
And again, to answer your question, so it's a combination of keynote speaking, breakout sessions. Sometimes I'm brought in to do a whole, workshop or training. I have, some online resources as well, and obviously my books. So there's a lot of different ways in which I'm trying to help restaurants operate at a higher level, especially with their teams.
All right. You've mentioned something just now about, the new book, but could you tell us a little bit more about it and the other book and the online, you have a new online course. Could you tell us something more about those items?
Oh,
The book and the online course?
are you asking me to promote the various services that I have so that people
Why not? Why?
Yeah, sure. Since you asked, sure, why not? Yes. So my first book, it's
Why
called The
not?
Wealthy.
I'm sure people can benefit from it.
Well, anybody who's watching this, if they're in the restaurant industry, they understand the importance of the hustle. So hopefully they'll get this part. So my first book, it's called The Wealthy Franchisee, Game-Changing Steps to Becoming a Thriving Franchise Superstar. In fact, you see the book right there. That is, it's all about it profiles top franchisees from all these different brands and summarizes what is it that they do differently that allows them to dominate, and how can the rest of us replicate that. So it's all about how to become a top franchisee. So that book is done really, really well. And a lot of franchise brands, they give a copy to every single new franchisee that comes into the system. So that's there. And I do talk about a number of restaurateurs. Then the newer book that just came out this year, it's called Stop the Shift Show, right there. Stop the Shift Show, turn your struggling hourly workers into a top performing team. So it's a really practical book on how to manage hourly workers, how they're different, and how we can influence them to engage them and help them achieve high performance as individuals and as a team. So I'm really super proud. And again, in that book, I profile a number of businesses, including restaurants, who are not complaining about kids these days, who are not complaining about having to find and retain employees, that they're doing great things. There's enough of them to prove that it's possible. So that's what those books are about. And then the new course, it's not out yet because we're still working on it, but hopefully another month or two. It's called HEMS, the Hourly Employee Management System. So it's based on Stop the Shift Show, but it's an interactive experience with videos, exercises, and tools to help business leaders and managers become best-in-class employers of hourly workers. So it's very practical. There's lots of tools. I'm going to make it reasonably priced so as many managers can go through it as possible and become HEMS certified, get a certification on managing hourly workers. So I'm super excited to get that out there, and I'll be releasing details about that soon.
That's great. So people can find your books, I presume, on Amazon. Is that the best way to find them?
Yeah, but wherever books are sold, there is obviously the printed book. There's an ebook. There is an audiobook. It's on Audible, and there's in other formats as well. Yeah, Amazon or wherever books are sold, you can find them. And for information on me and my speaking and my course, just go to scottgreenberg.com, B-E-R-G.
That's great. So about your innovative management tool, the 30-second leadership, could you tell us, about that you've
Yeah. I write a little bit about that in The Wealthy Franchisee, and I have a whole section, multiple chapters on that in Stop the Shift Show. Other than my keynotes, it's probably my most requested program that I'm asked to speak on. It's something I created with the founder of the Mendocino Farms restaurant chain. And we created this a model, a management methodology to help people assess employees for a specific task. And based on the assessment, use our color model to determine what is the best approach to coaching them. And so it focuses on the employee skill set, their hard skills, and their mindset, their soft skills. Measuring both of these separately, and then based off of the assessment, determining what is the best way to coach them. And there are other models out there, such as situational leadership, that are similar. We have a different approach, and our goal is to make this something that can be used by a 19-year-old assistant manager at a frozen yogurt shop. So it's very simple. It's very quick. That's why we call it 30-second leadership, but it's really powerful, and it dramatically changes the way people manage their employees. And people just love it when we teach it to them. Although I had one guy from he runs a bunch of businesses in Mexico, and after he went through the workshop, he said, "I just realized I'm a terrible boss." So I don't want to make him feel bad, but at least he became self-aware and realized what's possible for him and how he can get better at what he does. So we absolutely are so proud of this model, and it's helping a lot of people.
All right, that's great. So I'm sure there are many owners and operators and amongst our viewers that perhaps want to get in touch with you. I know you mentioned briefly about, how they get the books, but could you give us again a little bit more definition on how, some of these people can reach you, either email address, or what's the best way to get you, generally speaking?
Sure. So the best place, there's a whole contact form on my website, scottgreenberg.com, B-E-R-G and Berg. I'm also somewhat active on social media, very active on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. My email address is scott@scottgreenberg.com if someone wants to reach out directly.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Yeah, thank you very much for your very informative presentation, and best wishes for continued success. And I'm sure that we'll be touching base with you to utilize some of your services in the future. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Sure. So our future Dealmaker shows this year, with the year is sort of quickly coming to an end, but in November we have Brandon Robinson, who's a CEO of Tipsy Putt, which is a Northern California multi-unit chain of mini putt golf courses with pubs. Very unique concept, very successful. And he was formerly the founder of Soul Med Spa, which is was a very successful operation, which he sold. Our December show will include participation by our RRC team members like we did last year, and will be hosted by Jeremy Brockman, our marketing and PR director, and we'll be discussing some of Restaurant Realty's 2024 highlights, as well as wishing our audience a happy and healthy holiday season. We'll be announcing our co-host for 2025. We already have almost the first half of the year commitments from some very prominent and will be well received speakers. So we want to thank you all very much for joining us. And if you want to get in touch with me, I can be reached at steve@restaurantrealty.com, or you can reach me toll free at 888-995-9701. Take care of yourself, take care of others, and stay well. And thanks for your participation today. Again, Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you.